Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for making it out to our second session of our winter webinar series. This one is going to be a spotlight on water chestnut. Okay, I just want a little bit of background on the Northeast Aquatic Plant Management Society. For those of you who may not be super familiar with us, it is our mission to assist in the management of aquatic vegetation, to provide for scientific and educational advancement of our members, to encourage scientific research in all facets of aquatic plant management, to promote an exchange of information among members, similar to this webinar here that you are at, and to extend and develop our understanding in the discipline. Our members come from all different sectors of the field, including academia, government agencies, private consulting firms, herbicide manufacturers, and lake associations. We have annual meetings. Our annual meetings are held in January. We have an annual plant camp. Those are generally in September. And we have webinars that sometimes have CEUs. I do want to mention the webinar does not have CEUs. And we also offer a student scholarship, which is up to $10,000, and applications for that scholarship are due in November. To learn more about us, you can visit us at www.neapms.org. So today's session, as I mentioned, is going to be a spotlight on water chestnut management. Just a little housekeeping items. We are going to be running from 1 to 3 p.m. There'll be two presentation blocks, and they will be 30 minutes at the end for questions and discussion. If you have questions during the presentations, please type them in the chat box, and then I will read them aloud at the end of both of the sets of presentations. Again, want you to note that we are not offering CEUs for this webinar. We will try to do that for the autumn webinars. As you all heard just a moment ago, you are being recorded, and it's going to be shared on the NEAPMS website. So today we start with Carlos Moranta-Zariza, and he's going to be discussing optimizing water chestnut and management in Long Island, and then moving on to a panel of discussions talking about Lake Champlain water chestnut management. So if there's any questions about how this webinar is going to run, you can certainly type them in the chat box now, or if anyone's having any trouble. Okay, seeing none, I'm just going to say thank you, and please stay tuned for the autumn webinar series. And again, that a recording of this webinar is going to be posted on neapms.org. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
Sorry, Erica, before we start, I know that you mentioned that the questions can be, submitted to the chat, but just in case, can the participants, the attendees, just pop up and ask something out loud? Is that an option?
I don't believe they have the ability to unmute themselves. Is that correct, Emma?
Yes, but if we can have the raised hand feature, so if they do have any clarifying questions, we can put the raised hand feature and we can unmute you from our end. So I will put that back on.
Okay, great. Carlos, if you want to go ahead and share your screen. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and introduce you. So as I mentioned, first speaker is Carlos Moranta-Zariza, and Carlos is a PhD candidate at the Department of Ecology and Evolution in Stony Brook University. He also serves as the New York DEC Region 1 Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator for Long Island. His dissertation focuses on the impacts of sublethal stressors on the dynamics of a pollinator community, including species with different social strategies. Currently, he is also developing a management protocol to eliminate the presence of the invasive water chestnut in Long Island's lakes and ponds. And also, I should mention that Carlos is the recipient of the NEAPMS graduate student scholarship this year. So we're very excited to hear him speak. Go ahead, Carlos.
Oh, Carlos, we're not hearing you. Might be muted. I think I can unmute you on my end. Let's try that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there we go.
Oh my God, thank you. Because I, when I started sharing, I don't know why it was muted and I couldn't just go back to the window. I'm sorry. Okay, can everyone see my screen, right? Everyone can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. So, well, as Erica mentioned, today I'm going to talk about water chestnut. As you can see, I changed a little bit the topic of the topic, no, the title of the talk, but it's the same thing. I just like this. I think this was a little bit more explicit. So, for the record, I like interacting with the audience. So if at some point I say something that you want me to repeat, or is there something that doesn't like match up, whatever you're thinking, just by all means, please feel free to raise your hand, and we can make this like a short conversation. That's totally okay. I think we'll have plenty of time for that. Okay, now let's get started. So first of all, well, who is water chestnut? Well, water chestnut is like the species Trapanatans, is a species of the family Lythraceae, if I'm saying that correctly. It's the species, the sister species of Trapa bispinosa, which is one of the most commercially important Trapa species, particularly in Asia. And as you can see, the ecology of these plants it's highly conserved. They share very similar morphologies in terms of their seeds, which is what you're seeing right now. The rosettes and the photosynthetic like surface is also very similar between one species and the other. And well, today we're going to talk about Trapanatans. However, I hope that you see the potential of what I'm going to present to you today for application to other invasive species. Could be it depends on you and how creative we can get with this with what I'm about to show you. Okay, just for the record, again, Trapanatans is similar. It's closely related to Trapa bispinosa, which is a important commercial species. However, Trapanatans in itself is an economically relevant species. And I will say this, I wouldn't suggest anyone in Long Island, at least, to consume the nuts from the water chestnut, but I will say that I have tried them and they taste really good. So maybe we could, in the future, if the biochemistry of the seed works, maybe we could do something with that. But that's a crazy idea, which so just crazy people could contemplate. I will say a lot of things that seem a little bit out there, but I can assure you they are fully supported. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the life cycle because that's very important for what we're going to discuss today. Water chestnut has a very simple life cycle, at least in temperate regions, where the onset of the spring, actually, well, when the water reaches a threshold temperature and the near infrared radiation permeates to like some of the shallowest parts of the substrate in lakes or rivers. Then the seed spawns. The plant grows up to 10 to 15 inches tops. Like that's the size of the rosette, and each rosette can produce between 7, very few cases, up to 22 or 24. It depends on who you are quoting for that data. The interesting part, or the funny part, is that the plant dies after the seeds are released, which means this is an annual plant, and that has strong implications in its management as an invasive species. Now, today, what I want to talk to you about is what is the problem in Long Island with water chestnut, but that clearly applies to other places. What is our goal in terms of management? Why Long Island special conditions, special ecological conditions, foster an adequate environment for this initiative, for what we're going to talk about today. What can we do about these infestations, and what should we do? Those two things are not necessarily the same. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a model, which is the core of this presentation. It's a population dynamics model. I won't spoil it further than this. I want to tell you also about how we can set realistic expectations about the future of water chestnut management. I will talk to you about what's going to happen beyond that pretty math that we're going to see, and what are our next steps. So let's talk about the problem first. Let me see if yeah, there it goes. So what you're seeing right now is Massapequa Lake, one of the many lakes in Long Island. This is located in the Nassau counties, close to New York, well, somewhat close to New York City. And everything that you see here, all those green patches, all of that is water chestnut. As you can see, the infestation is pretty severe in this water body. It's not the only one, but that's the one that we're going to be focusing on today. However, what I'm going to describe today applies to every single water body in Long Island that has been infested by water chestnut. Okay. So what do we want to do with this? Because the infestation creates problems, creates environmental problems. For example, it reduces the habitat for different fish species. It reduces the habitat for different wildlife, particularly birds, and it also affects the macroinvertebrate community. Additionally, it prevents, the social uses of the water bodies. For example, angling in this lake with this degree of infestation is basically impossible. And angling is, a core value in many of Long Island's communities. So there are impacts that are beyond just the ecological consequences of the invasion. And our goal is to develop a sustainable strategy for water chestnut population control. That's what we want to do, right? And for that, we have different things that we can do, right? So historically, we know that we can do manual pooling. That's an activity that we at the DC do every year with different groups of volunteers. We'll talk about, its reach later. We also can do mechanical pooling or mechanical harvesting. Again, notes on that later. And of course, the less popular option, that is herbicide application, right? There are additional things that we could do that have been done in other places with different degrees of success. For example, one of them are benthic screens. Now, there are many other options, there are many other alternatives that we can use, but I just want to talk about these four because these four are the ones that, are more readily available, and these are the options that we kind of have at hand. Now, let me give you a little bit of perspective about the different degrees of success of one of these strategies. We're going to talk about mechanical harvesting or mechanical pooling. So mechanical pooling is done by a mechanical device, which is a harvester, right? And the problem with water chestnut in Long Island is it's an old problem. And back in 2018, by June 2018, Massapequa Lake, the lake that you saw a moment ago in the video, looked like this. This is Massapequa Lake. It's a 20-acre lake. And all of these green area that you're seeing, I don't know if you can see my mouse. There you go. All of this is water chestnut. As you can see, the lake has been covered, has been densely infested by water chestnut. Today, I mean last year, the infestation was even worse than what you're seeing right now. But let's go back to June 2018. So in June 2018, this was the situation of the lake. Now, a huge effort on mechanical harvesting was done during that season, And by August 2018, so just 2 months later, the lake looked like this. And it's pretty neat, if you ask me. Most of the water chestnut is gone. Like, we can clearly see some remnants, but the problem seemed to have been addressed, at least in its majority. Now, the problem is that, we didn't have a way to do a proper follow-up to this, as it happens in many, many places that we intervene for many other species. And today, the lake looks the way you saw in the video, which is worse than the image to the left. Just, at this point, 7 years later? But it's been like that since 2023, at least. So not 5 years later, we had a problem of the same magnitude. Does that mean that mechanical harvesting doesn't work? Well, definitely not. It does work to an extent, right? But is mechanical harvesting the single one-for-all solution to the problem? Well, I think the answer to that is no, right? And that applies to any other mechanism that we use. Because in the end, the question is not what can we do, right? We know that these alternatives have a degree of success. So the question is not what can we do, the question is what should we do with the tools that we have, right? So remember that our goal is to develop a sustainable strategy for water chestnut population control. Emphasis in the sustainable part, okay? Now, to answer that question, to reach that goal, we have to answer several questions. How many of each of these strategies do we need? I mean, how many people, how many hours, how many harvesters, how many times should we apply, for example, herbicide? What area should we cover using benthic screens, assuming that we were going to do that? For how long should we do it? Right? We clearly see that mechanically harvesting most of the water chestnut has a strong impact the same year. How long should we do it? If I bring a harvester and I operate it for 100 hours, will I have, the same, twice as much success as if I operate for 50 hours? Or what if I do it for 200 hours? Same for the number of people manually pulling, right? And is it cost and time effective? This is really sensitive because each of these strategies has a different cost associated to it. Not only a financial cost, also a logistic cost in terms of like human resource and, other factors. Now, there are many combinations of all these possible tools, right? And we need a way to gauge what adequate combination, and for how long should we use it, right? And that will depend strongly on what water body we want to intervene, the ecological conditions of that water body, the degree of infestation, and basically how many resources we have at hand. Now, there's not a single formula for that, or there's not a single solution for that, but we can approach a very simple generalization of how to answer this question in almost any conceivable set of circumstances. To do that, we develop a model, a mathematical model, and it's okay if you don't like math, don't worry about it. I also don't like it that much. But you don't have to love math to use it. And this is very simple math. And again, don't worry about following it. It's totally okay if you just want to, pay attention at the figures, which is the important part. The math, computers can do it for us, most of it. But for now, let's talk about the model a little bit. So this is a very simple model for a logistic growth population model. That means that this model assumes that there's a maximum number of plants that you can have in the lake, right? And there's an expected number of new plants next year per each plant that you have this year. That's pretty much it. So what we have here is basically a prediction, which is what we want to do, a prediction of what's going to happen next year, what's going to be the size of the population of water chestnut next year, taking into account how many plants we have this year producing a number of rosettes, right? So what we assume is that each adult plant today will produce a certain number of new rosettes next year. Basically, they will reproduce. And they will reproduce to the extent to which the lake or the water body has available area for that. Okay. Now, in in color, what you have in color here are those things in which we may have some agency at this point. For now, I am not going to talk about herbicides. We can talk about that later. I want you to focus on what we can pull from the water, either manually or mechanically, and if we can change the amount of available area in the lake. Okay. Oh, by the way, before I keep going, this is a simplification of the model, and this model is still a work in progress. However, what we have today is highly functional, and it has enough information to inform like real-time decisions. But it's still a work in progress. So for now, let's think about that red text, what we have agency on, which is basically how many plants we can remove per year, right? And to remove those plants, we're going to consider two exercises, two practices. The first one is manual pulling, and the second is mechanical harvesting. So manual pulling, as I mentioned, has been done for a long time, and we do it every year. It's a really cool activity. You can bring a lot of volunteers. People get invested in the activity, and it's a lot of fun. Now, it has different degrees of success depending on where you're doing it, and we want to know how successful it is under what type of conditions, right? And the other one is the harvesters, right? How many harvesters or how many hours of harvesting can you have? And what is the rate of mechanical harvesting? How many plants are you removing per unit time? You want to know that. Let's assume that you have a lake that is a water body that is small enough, or that you have enough resources so you can change the amount of area available for the water chestnut. For example, by reducing the photic available area or the substrate available, for example, by installing benthic screens, right? It also has to do with the distance to the patches that you have on a given year. I will talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, that's one of the things that we kind of like are considering. So let's break this in parts. What can we do with the mechanical harvesting, with the manual pulling, and I will leave the benthic barriers for last if we have the time. So now, one thing that happened when I started organizing the manual pullings, when I began as a aquatic invasive species coordinator for Region 1, was that I realized that we were spending around 5, sometimes even 6 hours on the field removing plants. Everyone kind of like scattered, and we were like removing like one by one, or just a few at a time. And I realized that, after the third hour or so, that was kind of like my estimation, people got chatty, and because you're tired, it's the middle of the summer, you start like talking and you stop pulling, which is totally okay, it's volunteer work. And I realized that actually by the fourth hour, I was not doing absolutely anything, and I wonder, like, well, are we using people's time in the most efficient way, right? Because people are giving us their time, and we have to value that, I think. So I assume, to answer this question, I assume that people actually were going to get tired, as I felt I was getting tired, and that they were going to stop pulling at some point. And I wanted to know at what point that amount of water chestnut that they were removing was so low that it didn't worth the effort or the time after that. To answer that question, I basically adjusted this small equation here, which is, what is the maximum rate of pooling? I assumed that the maximum rate of pooling was going to happen when the density of the water chestnut was the highest, so you didn't have to spend time looking for plants to pool. And also that that your first hour was going to be your most efficient hour, right? And based on that, what I assumed was that, people started very happy. And then what we did was we sampled how many plants per minute people were removing in each hour. And we actually counted the plants. That was extremely annoying. But people, they did the effort. And I realized that, by the end, like, the rate really fell down really quickly after hour 3, which kind of like coincided with what I had seen. Because by that time, people were just too tired to keep pulling. Okay, so keep that in mind. We learned that by the third and a half hours or so, it didn't make much sense to keep people pulling. Okay, now let's talk about the mechanical harvesting. Well, this has been quite an adventure because we have a mechanical harvesting that is supposed to be available to us, but for different, administrative reasons, we have not been able to use it. So for everything that you're going to see right now, like about the model, you will see an estimation of the mechanical harvester ability to remove plants. So what I am assuming at this point is that the mechanical harvester is going to harvest at the same rate, which is going to be its maximum rate, all the time during each hour of operation, right? Which means that for each hour of operation, you increase linearly the number of plants that you have removed. Meaning, if in the first hour you remove 100 plants, by the second hour, you would have removed 200 plants. That's pretty much it. That's the assumption at this point. And I will walk you through how we got somewhat realistic values for that, for this parameter, but for now, bear with me. Okay, so now we have a tool that let us play with how many hours, how many people should we have pulling, how many harvesters, and how many hours per harvesters we should have. So that allows us to ask about different combinations to set realistic expectations about the future, at least for water chestnut management in Massapequa Lake. All the data that you're going to see, all the results of the model are based on the data from Massapequa Lake. However, keep in mind that this model can be adapted to any water body that meets the ecological conditions that Massapequa Lake has, and we can talk about that in a bit. Anyway, so what I'm going to show you right now, and don't be concerned about that. I'm going to show you like a few really ugly plots and then a really beautiful one. But I want to gauge what is the degree of information summarization ability that this model has. So what you're going to see in the x-axis is going to be the years, and this is a prediction from year 0 to year 5. And in the y-axis, you're going to see the water chestnut abundance, the expected water chestnut abundance. So let's ask the model for the first scenario. Let's assume that I want to know how much effect I can have on what is the expected output of the population of water chestnut if I don't do absolutely anything. In this plot, there are 0 people pulling and 0 mechanical harvesters working. I will give you a little bit more of information about that in a moment. And let's see, this is what would happen if we don't do absolutely anything. But what if we keep doing what we have been doing, which is bringing people to do a pull for several hours, and we, spend X amount of hours and go X amount of times. So this is what would happen. In like the blue line here is what would happen with the population if we bring 150 people per season to do manual pulling. And as you can see, it's basically negligible. The difference between having 150 people and not doing anything. So I think this helps answering one part of the question. It's like, are we using the people's time in the most efficient way possible? Well, I would dare to say no, based on these results. Don't worry, it doesn't mean that we're going to stop doing it. We just needed to find a better way to do it. But anyway, it's not only about the number of people that we bring. It's also about how many hours of mechanical harvesting we should have to actually be able to control this problem, right? And this is what happens if you bring 3 different scenarios. The first one on top is what happens if I don't bring not only 150, now in green, where is my cursor there? Green, this line, or even 350 people per season. What would happen by year 10, not year 5? Well, if we only bring people and don't bring any mechanical harvesting, we basically won't do anything, sadly. But what if we combine those strategies with a mechanical harvester, harvesting for 54 hours, that's an arbitrary number, for 54 hours during the whole season. Well, these two plots look the same, and I will ask you to believe me for a little bit. This line is marginally lower than this line, meaning we would keep the infestation at bay, but it still would go to occupy as much of the lake as it has available. Meaning, if you tell me that you have a harvester that I can use for 54 hours, and I bring, 350 people, I will tell you, like, I appreciate the intention, but I don't think that's the best way to do it. We have to do something different. Otherwise, we're going to waste our time and our resources. So that's one of the things that the model is informing us. Okay. Now, these are just, this point we have 5 different combinations, no, 10 different combinations of circumstances, right? But you can have 125 volunteers with different pooling rates and different number for mechanical harvesting hours. In the end, actually, what you end up having is a bunch of possibilities because, again, all the combinations, all like the future stems from all these possible combinations. And as you can see, this is very messy. Don't worry about it. I told you 3 really ugly plots. Like this is the last one. But I want you to think about how many potential combinations you can have. And what we actually want is for any of these lines to approach to 0, right? As you can see, not many of them approach to 0. With 0 harvesting hours, we definitely do not have any chance of getting rid of the problem. With 54, we have a chance if we wait long enough and if we have enough people and if the pooling rate of the harvesting is really, really high, right? And if we increase just by 6 hours the number of harvesting hours, well, then our chances of controlling the infestation in the near future become, more optimistic, I would say. So what the next thing that we wanted to know is like, okay, we can control it under some circumstances, but, we cannot wait forever until we have it under control. What is our window, like our time scope to actually have this under control? So I asked, well, I would like to know what would happen by year 3. I want to know what do I have to do to control the infestation of wild chestnut in Massapequa Lake in 3 years. That's what I wanted to know. Now let's get rid of all these ugly plots, and I'm going to show you a plot that I think is absolutely beautiful, but it can be a little bit intimidating. Don't worry, I will walk you through it. It's totally okay. I was confused at the first time when I saw it. You're probably smarter than I am, but I will still do it as if it was for me. So this weird plot, it's a summary of the whole model by year 3. This is what would happen in year 3 under different scenarios. So let's see what each of these what each of these elements say. First of all, I hope that you can see the tiles here, those little squares. That is the status of the whole lake. Okay, each square is the status of the whole lake by the end of the 3rd year. What we have in the color scale is less infested, basically no infestation, in blue, to high infested, maximum infestation possible, in green. Okay, that's what the colors represent. Now, what we have in these different columns, the ones with the numbers 54, 60, 66, and 72, are the number of mechanical harvesting hours each year. That means that by the 3rd year, if you have mechanically harvested for 54 hours or 60 hours or whatever number it says here, you will expect the result corresponding to that plot. Now the little axes are the human factor in it. The number of volunteers goes from left 0 to right 350 per season. Again, per season. It doesn't mean that you need to bring 350 people on the same day. Like, let's say you can do 7 pools of 50 people each, or whatever combination that gives you at the end of the season 350 people pooling for 3.5 hours. And what you have in the y-axis here is the number, the maximum number of plants removed per hour. These are realistic numbers for the regular way that we do manual pooling. The average person tends to remove between 60 and 80 plants per minute during the first hour. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what can we learn from this plot? What we can learn from this plot is that if I have 54 hours of mechanical harvesting, I really don't expect to fully clear the lake, even if I have 350 volunteers additionally, like doing additional manual pooling, with a high or somewhat high manual pooling rate. So that tells us that this effort here won't be enough. We have to do better than that. Otherwise, we may take a completely different approach. What if we increase the number of hours of mechanical harvesting? If we do it for 60 hours, then we have better chances of substantially reducing the infestation by year 3. If we manage to bring a lot of people, somewhere around 350, right? And if most of them are, very agile in removing plants, okay? So what can we do here? Well, we keep increasing the number of hours, and we say, okay, let's do it for 66 hours or 72. And as you can see, the more time we have mechanical harvesting working, the better, which makes sense, right? However, even if you have a lot of mechanical harvesting, you still need some degree of manual pooling to actually be able to remove it. What I'm showing here with my cursor is what would happen with 72 hours of mechanical harvesting a year if you do not bring any volunteer, right? So you would still have infestation, because we know, as a matter of fact, that the mechanical harvester cannot reach really shallow water, and also the efficiency of mechanical harvester decreases with density, but I'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, so this is how we read these plots, right? So what we want is blue. Blue is good, green is bad, and everything increases towards the right. So towards the right, you have more volunteers and more harvesting hours. Make sense? I hope. Okay, now let's go a little bit beyond the pretty math. This is just a little comment. I am not including anything related to benthic barriers, but anything that can occupy the area that the water chestnut is occupying is something that is going to reduce the maximum occupancy area or the carrying capacity of the water chestnut in the lake. Can be a competing species, can be, well, anything that you can think that can cover the area, benthic screen or like the other species. So anyway, but we are focusing on the pooling rates, right? So in synthesis for this part, what this tool is doing is telling us that we can have water chestnut next year control or as a product of the water chestnut this year, what we have today, minus what we're removing. Again, same. It's the same rationale as the beginning. Okay. So when we went to the field to see how we could inform this model better, we realized that we didn't have enough data about the manual pooling. Like, we kind of wanted to know how efficient it was, and we had an issue with the mechanical harvester that I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So what we did first to assess how efficient we were doing the manual pooling, besides gauging the number of hours, was ask ourselves if we were using the right manual pooling method. So what I'm showing you here is how many plants per minute per hour people were removing in the first, second, and third hour. Okay, as you can see in this plot, we have a removal of somewhere around 80 plants per hour in the first hour. The second hour, like, it varies a little bit, but by the third hour, it has fallen down to as low as 20, even sometimes less than 20. So what we did was we implemented an adaptation of the spaghetti method that if you have not heard about that, you just go to the water and you just, with your in your arm span, you just grab as many rosettes as you can and you remove them. Now, our modification was that we were doing that in teams. Somebody would go in a straight line in a patch of water chestnut and would remove it, and then it would throw it behind them, and somebody would be behind them just picking up the plants, okay? And this is the per person, not per squad, not per two people, just per one person. This is how we change the amount of the number of plants per minute per person per hour. So as you can see, it increased tenfold. We basically went from 60 to 80 to up to 800 sometimes. So this was definitely a more efficient way to do it, which means we had to reconsider the results that I just showed you, because now we have a more efficient way to actually do that removal, okay? And we also changed a little bit the equation. That's a minor thing, but the model is a little bit more realistic now, okay? Again, we still have the same assumption, which we have actually measured in the field, that with the passage of time, with the passing of time, people become less efficient, okay? Now, this is actually one of the results from changing the method based on what the model informs us. What you see here, I do not have the scale in here. I apologize. For scale, this is a kayak of 7 feet long. It's a 7 feet long kayak. And all this area that you see here was clear from water chestnut in 3.5 hours by 28 people. We tried the same exercise with the regular method, and I couldn't even tell you how much area we cleared because it was negligible. In this case, we managed to clear more than 0.5 acres in that amount of time. That was, I think, pretty neat. However, this method, of course, is limited to the depth of the water, so we cannot do that in anything that is more than 5 feet deep, because most people cannot walk under those circumstances, and doing it from a kayak is not as efficient. Okay, so that's what we learned from the model, that we had to change the method, and we changed the method, and we actually saw differences. So that's the first part. The other part is the mechanical harvester. But as I mentioned before, we have had a problem with the mechanical harvester. So we basically do not have data for that. Now, what do we do now without that? Well, we build our own. That's what we're going to do. And thanks to NEAPMS, we are going to be able to do it because they have decided to fund the initiative of helping us create our own water chestnut mechanical harvester, right? Which is what we're going to do. Now, this is not a regular mechanical harvester. It's a very small mechanical harvester that is fully automated. Why does it have to be fully automated? Because, again, it's small. It has to be cheap to operate, cheap to replace if it gets damaged or lost. And it has to require the minimum amount of personnel and minimum amount of qualification for the person to operate it, right? So those are the characteristics of this mechanical harvester that we are designing. Now, once this mechanical harvester is ready, it will be able to self-navigate, meaning the only thing you will have to do is bring it to the shore, you put it in the shore, you turn it on, and it goes and finds its way to the plants. It, of course, will harvest, of course, and it will also capture and provide reports in geospatial format, meaning we can have shape files either with points or polygons that will give us an idea of where were the plants distributed in the lake, and where have they been harvested, right? So how does it operate? Well, it has two types of movements. One is ballistic, so the harvester has a radius of visibility. Basically, it's able to say, hey, I can see a water chestnut there, so I'm going to go and catch it, right? If that's the case, and the harvester can see it, it will go in a straight line towards the plant, and it will remove it. Now, if it doesn't, it will move diffusely in a Brownian motion fashion. So it will basically, wander around until a plant reaches its radius of visibility. And once it reaches its radius of visibility, it will know where to go, and it will go in a straight line. right? Basic Brownian motion. Now, for you to have an idea of how this actually going to look like, I think it's movie time. So I have a little bit of a movie for you. This is a simulation using somewhat realistic parameters for how the harvester will operate. Now, I want you to follow this little red dot. Everything that is blue is water. Everything that is green is water chestnut. Okay. So if we ask it to go, let me make it faster because otherwise we'll be here forever. It's gonna be, exploring here and there until it finds a patch. Once it finds a patch, it will remove it and it will keep, exploring whatever it can. Okay, and I just made it faster, but as you can see, the less dense the vegetation is, the more it takes to collect the next plant, right? Meaning we expect the efficiency of the mechanical harvester to fall down with a decreased density. So there's going to be a point in which you have controlled the infestation to a degree that you shouldn't use mechanical harvester anymore, because it's going to be a very inefficient way. Like look how long it's taking for it to just find these spots and just removing them, because it doesn't know where they are, right? Of course, there are many ways to kind of like compensate for that, but for now, what I want you to, the message that I want you to keep is that the efficiency of the mechanical harvesting is also density dependent. Now, there are some additional benefits of developing this mechanical harvester. One is that since it's able to navigate and provide geospatial reports, we can use it not only for harvesting, but also for automated or semi-automated surveys of vegetation on the surface. This cannot go underwater. Like the camera that does the classification and the identification is not going to go underwater. So whatever floats, it can capture, and it can tell you where should you focus. Let's say you have a big lake and you have like some patches, but you really don't know where they are. You don't have to spend the whole day going over the whole thing. You can just release the automated, harvester or the automated surveyor at this point, and it should be good to inform you enough of where should you go and remove them. Okay, so from this prototype, there are several other potential applications. The first one is clearly the automated mechanical harvesting of water chestnut. And we can do semi-automated surveys of water chestnut, of course. Ludwigia, hopefully, that is another invasive species that we have in Long Island, in the Peconic River. We can follow, infestations of parrot feather that is somewhat hard to find because it's very sparse at this point in the places that we have identified. And we can, at least from ashore, we can map also degrees of infestation of Phragmites, which is also a problem that we have here in Long Island. Okay, so we have different challenges of mechanical nature, of technical nature. One is keeping the production at a low cost, but for now I can tell you the current status of the prototype has been really cheap. Right now we have a navigation system that is fully functional, so it knows where it is, it knows where it's going, it knows how fast it's going. So we're getting there. We have to make it scalable, meaning we have to be able to produce more than one at a really low cost, because a single mechanical harvester, as I mentioned, this is going to be a small device. So one single harvester is not going to do much. You
Sorry,
need
Carlos.
a small.
Just a 5-minute warning.
I'm about to finish.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Am I about to finish? Anyway, we also need to do proper modeling training, but we already have a setup for that. And of course, if we want to make this, more broad, like if we want to extend the reach of this project, we have to make it suitable for non-Long Island conditions. Okay. So since I have talked too much, I'm going to speed up. But we just want to replace the requirement of the big mechanical harvester with this prototype that is really cheap. Now, there are several assumptions that we have to cover. The first one is water chestnut has a seed bank that can live up to 10 years. It's been reported. The problem is we do not know what is the rate of survival of each seed. It can be, 50% dead at the second year, and the rest, dies progressively every year, or all of them can die at the end of the 10th year. So we don't know that. The way we corrected for that was we inflated the reproduction the reproductive value of each plant for our simulations. But we're going to capture that data during this season, hopefully. We are assuming that there's no immigration of water chestnut, okay, which is not truly, like, it's not completely like true, but we assume that immigration is low enough that we can get rid of that. And we are also assuming that the harvesting hours, you know, are always operating at max rate. But as I mentioned before, the actual efficiency of the mechanical harvester is density dependent. So we also have to correct for that, but we're working on it. And we're also assuming that there's no competition with other species, okay? Now, if we bring all of that into, you know, into play, that we can start like coming up with all these different simulations, and we end up asking ourselves, how is it going to be in 3 years? How is it going to be in 5 years, in 7 years, depending on different type of combinations, right? And in the end, we finish with this pretty prediction that is somewhat like it's as realistic as we can get. Same type of plot, right? We ask ourselves how this is going to work in 1 year, 3 years, 5 and 10 years, with 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, and 96 hours of mechanical harvesting, with the pooling rates that we saw during the last season that I talked to you about, where we changed the regular manual pooling, the regular pooling method, for the squad method, right? And now we have a more feasible pathway to follow through to actually get this infestation under control. And we are using this model to inform decisions for, you know, for how to invest our resources, both in terms of time and money and, you know, everything else. Now, what are the next steps? Well, we keep needing people to come and, you know, work with us and collaborate with us, but that can be challenging. If you have ever, you know, look for volunteers for these kind of things, it can be challenging. However, we are lucky enough that we have created a network of collaborators, including even local businesses. They actually are, like, some of them are interested in this process. But what we really want is to get a lot of volunteers from the next generations of, you know, future anglers or future, like, you know, basically coming citizens. So we have focused our efforts on getting volunteers from different schools in Nassau County and Suffolk County, two of the counties in the two counties on Long Island, with, you know, different degrees of success. Actually, 1 degree of success, not too successful, but successful enough. We got a really, like, we established a really good relationship with West Babylon High School. They have 30 students from AP Environmental Science. They're really engaging. They did a great job last year, and they're going to join us on One for Pools on June 11. We're going to collect a lot of data from that event. We are also working with the Rubicon team. We have other sorts of volunteers, and we work with other agencies like LISMA in the Water and Soil Conservation District of Nassau County.
Just 1 minute.
Okay. And, you know, we have like promoted this thing. We tell everyone we can, hey, we want you to come and help us removing water chestnut, because the more support we have for this initiative, the more likely we are to actually have an impact on the process of controlling these invasive species. And we have learned so much along the way about how to address other invasive species with similar ecologies. So we expect this project to reach farther than Massapequa Lake and farther than just water chestnut management control. And having said that, well, I want to thank to a lot of people who are not all listed here, unfortunately. But again, a lot of people have been invested in this. Stony Brook, like the Ecology and Evolution Department at Stony Brook, clearly the DEC has been extreme, like strong support for us, especially the freshwater fisheries manager, Region 1. That's Heidi O'Riordan and Catherine McLean and Stephen Pearson. They have been really, really helpful with this. I want to also thank NEAPMS for, you know, opening the space for this and for providing support, financial support for this initiative, and the Theoretical Ecology Lab, the Andrea Lab at the Ecology and Evolution Department in Stony Brook. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. Oh, I managed to do it. Good. I was concerned about time.
Great. Thank you so much, Carlos. Mike, if you want to try to share your screen, we can just get going. So next up, we have the Lake Champlain Water Chestnut Management Case Study and Technical Report. And we're going to start with a talk from Michael Greer, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Then we'll hear from Meg Modley, Lake Champlain Basin Program. Then Kim Jensen at Vermont DEC. And last, we'll hear from Aaron Benny-Volrath at New York State DEC. So we'll just jump right in with Mike. Go ahead. Thank you. We can see your slides, Mike, but we cannot hear you right now.
Mike, I think you're muted, so I can unmute your line. Can you hear us now? There you are.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
I'm sharing from Mike, so just to make that clear.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry for the false start there. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Greer. I'm the program manager for the Aquatic Plant Control Research Program with the Army Corps of Engineers Research Development Center. We've got broad authority to research management practices, ecology, things of that nature that are needed to manage aquatic invasive plants. And one of the programs that we've participated in with multiple stakeholders in the Lake Champlain Basin on is the removal of water chestnut. And this really presented a unique opportunity from a research perspective because the program's been around a long time. There's been fairly well kept records in terms of the costs associated with the management and the removal success and things of that nature. So we contracted with Limnotech to review some of that history with the program and see what kind of nuggets we could find in terms of benefits, impacts, cost, things of that nature. Next slide, please. Okay, so Limnotech did a really great job working with the stakeholders in the Lake Champlain Basin, not just on the Vermont side, but across the board, and really synthesized a lot of data for us. And they produced basically 3 products. They have a report that summarizes everything in detail. They produced a fact sheet that summarizes it at a pretty high level. And then a little bit later in my slides, I'll share a link to a GIS story map that offers a more interactive way to look at some of the information that they were able to synthesize and present for us. I'm not going to go through all of these pieces in my presentation, but they are all covered in the report. And what we will spend a little bit of time on is more of the challenges and recommendations, but there is a lot of other good information in the report and the GIS story map. Next slide. Okay, so here's the fact sheet. I did send Meg and a couple of other folks a copy of this fact sheet. Maybe there's a way we can distribute that to all the participants. I know this is really hard to see, but really, we tried to have 2 pages front and back that summarize the effort and really helped stakeholders, not necessarily just people involved with the management, understand the nature of the problem, the nature of the work that's going on, and share some of the recommendations related to challenges. Next slide, please. Okay, here is the link to the story map. that I mentioned. You can get that through the QR code or through the URL that's there. All right, next slide. So one of the things that they looked at is a fairly simple analysis, and this is very telling, right? And I think helps, it's a really important communication point when talking about what we're dealing with, what we've seen over the course of time that it's been managed, but what's the potential for water chestnut within the Lake Champlain Basin. So on the left side, you can see where it's historically been managed. And then on the right side of that, using some fairly simple parameters in GIS, they were able to estimate, well, what's the potential range of water chestnut in Lake Champlain if it weren't managed? And you can see it's pretty extensive. The management has had a tremendous benefit, not only in the areas where it's been managed, but also in protecting areas that haven't been heavily infested or infested at all, for that matter. So again, a very important communication point for stakeholders and resource managers when we try to justify the benefits of this work. Next slide, please. Okay, again, here is just a little bit more history. I think some other folks will cover this in their presentations as well. And I'm certainly not an expert on the history of this. We've got some folks on the webinar that are much more familiar with it than me. But over time, there's been a combination of mechanical harvesting and hand pulling. No herbicides have been used in the lake to this point. So you can see there's been some periods of pretty heavy mechanical harvesting. And as we move closer to present day, the mechanical harvesting has gotten quite reduced, and there's a more heavy reliance on hand pulling in less densely infested portions of the lake. And that's really good, but there is a little bit of a tipping point, and Carlos sort of hinted at this in his presentation, in that there's a little bit of give and take. Some years you do better and you gain ground, and every now and then, for a variety of reasons, whether it's the resources for management or other like weather, lake level type scenarios, that can sort of disrupt that normal efficiency that we see. So that drives some of the changes that you see in the map. Next slide, please. And in terms of recommendations, there's a handful. The program's really been very successful. There's always room for improvement. Everybody's always looking for efficiencies, particularly in this day and age of constrained budgets. One of the biggest challenges is dealing with management of harvested material, whether it's through a mechanical harvester or through hand pulling. And as you dive into the details of each of those management methods, moving the collected plants from where they're collected into the lake to shore, and then to an off-site management area, it's pretty intensive. And we may be at a point where some creativity would help make that more efficient. As with a lot of management efforts, particularly with hand pulling, having a lake-wide staffing strategy that provides consistency and volunteers in the areas where it's most needed and during the right time of the harvesting season is really important. Again, I think other folks can speak to this with a little bit more detail, but some years your volunteer staffing might be really robust and you can accomplish a lot. In other years, for a variety of reasons, it might be a little less and you're not able to accomplish the management goals that are needed to keep gaining ground, right? And that it's not a criticism at all. It's just the nature of the game. Again, related to a point that Carlos made in his presentation, knowing where the water chestnut is, enabling people that are either hand harvesting or on a mechanical harvester to accurately map and identify where those areas are is very, very important, considering, you know, they could be paddling maybe up to several miles from point to point. The fourth bullet there, again, not a criticism. You know, when we start a management effort, we think maybe, for example, all right, we want to reduce the extent of water chestnut. We can document that, but what are the other ways to communicate success? One way might be, well, what are the other improvements that we see within the ecosystem, or what has been the ripple effect in the economy for having this management completed. So being able to record the extent, the changes, the benefits is really important. And then the last bullet there, really trying to understand what the movement of the seeds, the nutlets are within the lake, so we can more strategically look for and target infested areas is an opportunity. And I think with that, maybe my last slide.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information with the group. I'm sorry it's a little bit out of order because I've got another commitment that I've got to get to, but if there's any questions, Meg or others on the webinar can pass those along or maybe answer them on my behalf. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Mike.
Mike.
So I feel like you just got sort of the Cliff Notes version of our Lake Champlain water chestnut story, and now you're going to get all of the detail and the blood, sweat, and tears pieces of it. I'm Meg Modley with the Lake Champlain Basin Program, and my role here is really just to introduce sort of the setting of Lake Champlain and let everyone know, you know, this is a 120-mile long lake. We have, you know, 2 states, it's an interstate and international water body, and a really unique story to have the Army Corps come in and do an assessment of the long-term management on Lake Champlain. And so the south end of our lake, you know, without any management looks like a putting green. We have very dense monocultures of Trapanetans with cut channels, and the biggest issues in the southern end of the lake where it's much more narrow is it acts more like a river, and so we need navigation channels, and removing water chestnut has direct impacts on boating, fishing, swimming, recreating, and enjoying the area. It's also a very remote area of the lake, and it's really hard, I think, from a long-term management perspective to be able to engage and involve the public and all the stakeholders in understanding the gains that have been made and the success of the program, because it is a remote area and there aren't as many people that are there seeing it and utilizing the space every day. I mean, for those who do, I think they reap the benefits, but it's hard to tell the story to the larger community. So NEAPMS was first detected in Lake Champlain in the early 1940s. It's suspected to enter Lake Champlain via the Champlain Canal, coming up from the Hudson system, and entered the South Bay of the lake and had very good conditions there and sort of grew in a northward fashion. And the states have been engaged and involved before the 1980s, but really consistent management began in the early 1980s with the state of Vermont with significant support from the Army Corps of Engineers. And that funding has been sort of the critical baseline. You may have caught in the fact sheet that Mike shared that we've spent about $15 million managing water chestnut in Lake Champlain since the inception of the program. And about annually now we're averaging around $700,000 that we spend. And it's a really complicated management animal, I will say, that Kim Jensen from the state of Vermont mostly wrangles with mechanical harvesting and hand harvesting contracted crews. The Lake Champlain Basin Program came on the scene in the early 1990s when our organization was created, contributing to help collaborate the management efforts between the states and the province of Quebec, but also to bring financial resources to help support the annual management of water chestnut. And we hold regular meetings, usually once or twice a year, to talk about the management successes and challenges of the previous field season and the obstacles that we have coming up for the next field season. And so that is everything from how to cobble together different federal, state, and local funding sources and partners to coming up with new strategies for how we get after either new satellite populations that have popped up, or we just, are grinding our brains about why one certain site, was really well under control and then had this huge rebound, but we got great success in another area of the lake. The Nature Conservancy has played a significant role in management, largely through hand pulling and trying to protect different, I'd say, habitats and areas of conservation need, mostly in tributaries and some of the shorelines in the southern end of the lake. And then the Quebec Ministry of Environment and other local nonprofits within the province of Quebec have also helped to survey and harvest water chestnut in the Quebec portion of the watershed. And then we had U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service become involved later in the game when a population popped up in the Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge, and they've been annually participating in our work group and our harvesting programs. So these are two graphics that you will see, and largely I'm just here to talk about the bigger picture of, tracking progress over the long term, how we communicate with the public, and wrangle with the cost challenges. But also in the graphic on the left, what you'll notice is we had a significant reduction in funding in the early 90s, and we had really good success of managing the densest populations and pushing them further south in the lake. And then we had this huge rebound directly related to the reduction of funding, which looked like, no less mechanical and hand harvesting efforts. And so I think the point's been made, and we go back to this time after time when we have concerns about securing funding, that we really need to maintain this. We need to do it year after year. We cannot let up. And some years, we take 2 steps forward, and other years we take 3 steps back, and then we take 4 steps forward and 2 steps back. And there's so many variables that trying to evaluate the efficacy of this program annually is really not, I think, where you're going to find the worth of the program. You need to look at it over decades, periods of time. And how we communicate that to the public is we have, a State of the Lake report that shows in red where we're investing in the mechanical harvesting, where we have densities that are greater than 25–50% of the area infested with water chestnut. We have to get in there mechanically and harvest, versus those yellow areas where we're still investing a lot of resources to survey and hand harvest. And many of our satellite populations that are popping up in the northern end of the lake, some have come and gone from the map, others are new, and these are largely all hand harvesting operations to date. Takes a lot of time and resources to reallocate mechanical harvesting to the northern part of the lake. So I'm just here to say this is a long game, consistent management for over 40 years, management for closer to 60 years. It definitely takes a village of all these local, state, and federal partners. We need the sustained funding. We do have limitations on the number of contractors that are available and staff that are available to work on these projects, but collectively, when we work together through partnerships with the 2 states and the province of Quebec, we seem to have been able to overcome that in the long term. We're looking to expand the amount of resources we can bring in and maintain the public support. We try not to get discouraged by these challenging years, but we are also thinking about how we can expand our toolbox and what other technologies can we utilize. We've had research into what kind of native species bycatch might be obtained in mechanical harvesting efforts. So can we better map? Can we use drones? How can we more efficiently get after this population in Lake Champlain? So setting that sort of interstate and international stage, I'm going to hand it over to the states to talk in much more detail about the on-the-ground operations.
Hi, folks. My name's Kim Jensen. I'm with the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and I've been wrangling this animal for a few years now, so I appreciate everyone's help that is a partner with me and keeping me afloat. So Meg's gonna forward the slides for me, so go right ahead. I'm gonna get into the nitty-gritty of the program. And so as an aquatic invasive species program, we do a lot of things. And Meg, I'm not sure if you've gotten my revised version of the presentation. I'm going to just skip the slide, but you can see all the things that we have done. Yep, Meg, this is unfortunately not the correct one. I've shortened it tremendously.
You want to just share your screen and I'll stop sharing?
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Sorry about that.
No, not your fault. Can you just see the presentation and not the
We see it. No, we see the sidebar.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. So, so we oversee around 107 miles in Lake Champlain, and we have a whole operation within the entire lake. And so we have hand pulling operations, and they're color coded towards the map that you see here on the right. So we have a lead team that is green, and these are contracted crews. These are not volunteer operations. We have utilized volunteers in the past, and we do try to utilize volunteers when it's a small site, but we've found exactly how Carlos found that after a few hours, people get really bored or tired. So we actually use contracted crews. We have a professional crew, and that is a main team. And so they go far, and they have smaller infestations, whereas the purple team is our crew team, and that's the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps. And they go to tributaries or places where there's a lot of plants and easy accessible. So those crews are generally new every year. They get trained up to do the work, and then they move on. Our green team are people that come back every year, and they're very aware of where the population is. We also have hand pulling with John boat operation down here that's in orange. So those are folks that actually go near the mechanical harvesting sites and try to get within the cattail mats, which is inaccessible by the harvesters. And then, of course, we have the mechanical harvesters within the red zones in the further southern locations where the densest locations are. So how do we figure this out? Well, generally with the hand harvesting sites, it's less than 25% cover, less than 15,000 rosettes estimated. These are places where there's sporadic growth and little pods that are interspersed with other vegetation. We have about 67 sites in Champlain proper, and then 27 sites within the basin. So in Champlain, it's about 127 miles that we harvest, and then deposits are generally, spoils are deposited on high water mark, above the high water mark on site. The mechanical harvesting is done in sites that have more than 25%. Generally, it's a mat, and there's no way that we would even think of hand harvesting these sites. We have about 13 sites in Champlain, and the distance of about 13 miles of those harvested sites. These spoils are trucked offshore, and then they're dumped in a farm field that composts them. This is an example of one of our hand harvesting operations. So this is Gander Bay. This is Bawaga Bay, and it's about 5,000 acres. So we know where the water chestnut is. We have mapped it. We have also digitized all of our hard copy maps that were historically used, and now we have those online on a GIS layer, so we can know exactly where to go. But some of the problems with these sites is it's a long way to get there. We have to paddle for a long way, and then it's a long way back after a long day. It can be very challenging, especially when you're dealing with Champlain, which is a pretty big body of water. Our mechanical harvesting sites, you can see those are in the red. Generally, we stay within the most northern mechanical harvesting sites. We're focusing on those for the past few years because we've had some increases in the hand pulling operation. So we have basically a line that's here in Benson Landing where hand pulling operations start north of there. So our focus of the mechanical harvesting is within this northern section to keep the mats from floating to our hand pulling operation. Basically, this is what our mechanical operation looks like. So we have 2 harvesters, a transporter, and then it's trucked, the spoils are trucked off site. This is a drone overview of one of our sites, our most northern site, which is New York Light 4. And you can see there's different colors showing the variation of the cover. And we can also estimate how well those mechanical harvesters did each year by looking at this data from the drones. There we go. So this is a graph of the hand harvested rosettes, which are the blue line, and the mechanical harvested loads, which is the red line, and the hand harvested rosettes are on this axis. The mechanically harvested loads are on this axis over the years. So while a lot of people may not find this an interesting graph, I certainly do, because it really shows some of the nuances for this program over the years. You can see that there's kind of a similar pattern in both operations, and that's really showing the water levels are consistent. When it's opposite one another, like here, or here, that means there is some kind of water level change, whereas the mechanical harvesters could not get to the site because it was a dry year, but the hand pulling operation could get there. This year, in 2017 and 2018, we changed the operations of the mechanical harvesting and the hand harvesting. So the hand harvesters would not do anything more than 50,000 rosettes in a site. So we changed the operation so those hand harvesters weren't, extremely overwhelmed with the amount of spoils and the amount of harvesting that was going on. And so far that's worked to our advantage, with the mechanical harvesters really just taking on the brunt of that work. And then this past year, in the past couple of years, where we are having an increase, and that is likely due to the floods that has happened in Vermont. So we're seeing one of those two steps, not back, but forward, due to the flooding situations, where we have way more plants, and the plants are huge. So they're not 12 inches across, they're 24 inches across. The record for nutlets was 27 this past year. So I think we're having an increase of the nutrient really affecting the rosette size and the volume. This is some historical information for you to see the mechanical harvesting operations over the years. So the mechanical harvesting is in red, and you can see that we've tried to chase back the mechanical harvesting to the Dresden line. So that's what this yellow line is here. So we've been pretty effective at beating the mechanical harvesting down to the lower southern region. Sure, it's not forwarding. There you go. So with that, oh, I'm sorry about that little graphic there. We keep having more populations pop up, unfortunately, but there's also been some successes. So these are all the sites that you saw on Meg's map, the most northern sites, little pockets of new populations. So one is Black Creek Marsh that was found in 2016. Originally, we had about 1376 rosettes, and in 2018, I think it rose to about 7,000 rosettes, and this was a volunteer site. We changed it over to contracted crews, and now we're down to 40 rosettes in 2024 and back with volunteers doing that site. Sandbar State Park, we found about 50 rosettes in 2019. We didn't find any in 2024. Sandbar, WAMA, Wildlife Management Area, that's what this site is. We found about 17,000 rosettes in 2022. And last year we found about 400, although you could see there was some left behind, so that may be more like 500 that we didn't get to. But we also found a new site in Sandbar in this location here, thanks to a consultant who goes to back bays and back wetland areas to survey for us to see if there are new infestations. And sure enough, they found this huge infestation here that's about 14 acres. And then we also had Gander Bay, and that's what this is showing in 2022. That was found in Missisquoi National Wildlife Region area. In 2022, 2023, we were unable to harvest it. Whereas in 2024, we finally got there, got the right operations in place, and we were able to finish it. I would say 99% was completed. And there was around 60,000 rosettes. So that was a huge accomplishment and completed by many staff, many volunteers and work crews and Missisquoi National Wildlife staff and Lake Champlain Basin staff too. So this is that site, a little close up. You can also see how we do map our sites now. So we developed a mapping program, and this past year was our first year that we really brought it to our contractors as well. So we use it, our contractors use it to map where the spoils are harvested. So you can see this green layer, that was the original site of the infestation that we knew of. And then the blue layer is where we were able to harvest last year. And this year is where we were able to harvest this past year. So this mapping program has been really helpful in trying to dial in where we should go and how much of the population is at a higher MAT level or an infestation level. And I will lead it over to New York.
Thank you, Kim. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Venny-Valrath. I work as a NEAPMS contractor at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, working closely with the Lake Champlain Basin program on different work. And one of the aspects of work that I do is help coordinate a small portion of the water chestnut removal work that New York does. And so one of our main contributions is through a contract with the town of Dresden to do large aquatic. Can you keep that up, Kim? Actually, I don't think I have the slides.
I didn't let it go. Let's see.
But so we've contracted over the last almost 20 years with the town of Dresden to do large scale mechanical harvesting. And they have focused on 3 main locations that are shown in the map with stars. Near the Chubbs Dock area there in the north. In the middle there, we have the South Bay area, and that's the large focus of the team because that's where one of our main access points is to the southern end of the lake, is that South Bay boat launch. And then finally, they will also sometimes go into the Champlain Canal and do some harvesting there. And this has been a great partnership along with New York State DEC, the town of Dresden, and then the equipment has been it's owned through New York State Canal Corps, and they've been able to contribute through donation of that equipment. So largely the cost for that work at those 3 locations have been about $50,000 a year. They have a harvester, a transporter, a conveyor, and then they take those spoils via the conveyor into a dump truck to a dump site that's located off Route 22. I did want to highlight too that happily we've recently gotten a grant through the Lake Champlain Basin program to upgrade the almost 20-year-old equipment that the team is using. So they'll be able to have updated motors on their harvester and transporter. And another important aspect of their upgrade is that they will be upgrading their mapping equipment so that we hope to be able to have better data, such as Kim has shown, about where exactly the harvesting of the water chestnut is happening in those starred areas. If you can click next, Kim. I just wanted to touch a little bit on some of the assistance that we do for hand harvesting. And the main point that we've assisted with in the past is at a site near Plattsburgh. So you can just hit next. It'll zoom in on the area. It's in the Cumberland Bay or Cumberland Head area with just on the south there is Wilcox Dock. The population was reported or found in 2023, reported to a Lake Champlain Basin program steward who was able to do a little bit of hunting in the area and actually found that dense population up in the Scamotion Creek area, or also known as Dead Creek. I shouldn't have added so much animation. Kim, can you hit next? And it'll show a picture just of that larger infestation of over 30 acres up in that creek. But in 2023, we did hand harvest 160 rosettes out of the Wilcox Dock area. So that's that southern area that's shown in green that was harvested. And then if you can click next, I'll just give a little update of our 2024 efforts. So in 2024, through a collaboration of the Lake Champlain Basin Program boat stewards, New York State DEC staff, as well as Brian Green at the Adirondack Park Invasive Plant Program, or APIP, we were able to go out and do, again, hand harvesting in that Wilcox Dock area. Sadly, the beds had expanded. So instead of, I think it's at 160 plants in 2023, we ended up with a truck bed load of water chestnut that was pulled out of the creek. But so going into the future, if you click one more, Kim, I think that'll be my last part of the slide. We plan to continue to do hand harvesting in the Wilcox Dock area, but we realize that we need to try to address containment of that population up Scamotion or Dead Creek. So we are talking with our partners at APIP, the Lake Champlain Basin Program, the Clinton County Soil and Water Conservation District, and the Lake Champlain Sea Grant to see what we can do about containing that population. And we would like to explore potentially putting booms to trap any floating water chestnut that might be coming out. And so we've been talking to Guy Middleton at Upper Saranac Foundation, who's been using the booms for many years now to contain Eurasian water milfoil coming out of a creek. So we're hoping to explore that in future years. So with that, I think that's the end of the New York portion, and I think you had a few more slides, Kim.
No, that was all set for me.
So I think with that, then we can switch over to discussion or questions.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Lots of really cool information, lots of beautiful math, Carlos. And as the Lake and Pond Connection said, that's a lot of miles that you guys are managing in Lake Champlain. So we really appreciate you coming on today and sharing with us your stories. So we have a couple questions in the chat. Sorry, I forgot my video. I'm talking to the screen and there's nobody here. Anyways, so Katie asked for Carlos. The model has to have a starting size of the population. What is the assumed starting size in your model? And then it's sort of a two-part question. And then instead, could you model different starting sizes to try and pinpoint what the population size is when manual harvesting is no longer a viable option, if you know how many volunteers you have?
Okay, so well, that's two really good questions. The model is flexible enough that you can use it to any degree of, like, to start your simulation with any degree of infestation. The results that you saw are tailored to Massapequa Lake, right? So in that case, what we did was we actually collected like several rosettes, and we estimated, like we built the distribution of their sizes, and based on that, we did several random draws following, I think it was a beta distribution. I don't remember at this point what distribution we used, but anyway, and that way we estimated the number of rosettes, which is what the model receives. Like this model, like the unit for the model is number of rosettes, right? So that's how we did that simulation. Now you like there's this paper by Stephen Pearson and collaborators where they have a good method of estimate, like of going from area to number of rosettes or dry biomass. Like they have a really good function for that, so you can also use that. So to answer the first part of the question is, we measure it, we estimated somewhere around 60% of total carrying capacity of the lake. We estimated the carrying capacity of the lake using the profile, they estimated the profile of the lake. And that's how we did that simulation. Now, the answer to the second question is, well, you can use the model to estimate that. In more detail, the model has another parameter that is called the Kepler's K. Ripley's K? I don't remember. It's the letter is K. I'm sorry. So that is a metric for the degree of clumpiness of the, of the heart of the water chestnut. So depending on that value, you will be able to tell if you should use a concentrated effort, for example, with mechanical harvester or manual pulling. If the value is too low, then your efficiency will fall, and the model will start suggesting you to change the type of, like, the number of people that you need and the type of manual pulling. Because, by the way, one thing that I didn't mention is that this squat method that is like super efficient only applies to dense patches, like to the mat. If you have a spread, population, that doesn't work, and the model will tell you when to switch from one to the other. I do not know if that addresses your full question, but if there's anything else that you want me to expand, just let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carlos. Katie, if you have additional questions, you can certainly put them in the chat. The next question is, oh, she says, yes, you covered it. So good job. The next question is for Kim, and Katie's asking, I don't know if it's the same Katie, but maybe. Katie is asking if you are counting each rosette or if you're using some sort of proxy to estimate.
That's a really good question. The historical method has been to count every rosette. So when I took over the operation, it was like, really? Should we use some other metric? And I think at different times we've used weight, and we do try to use weight. So we do have a conversion factor for weight that we do use for the mats when we run across them. So we do try to, yes, count every single rosette, and we understand that there's small ones and larger ones in the end of the season versus the small ones in the beginning of the season. But just on average, we use the rosette number. For those large mat areas, we basically use the weight conversion factor that we have. So that's how we estimate it. Sometimes also when we come across like a big patch, we just look at it and say, oh, that's about 500. Because we do this every day, we kind of can estimate the number of rosettes in a patch when we come across them.
Thank you. That's interesting and impressive that you're counting all of those rosettes. That's all the questions we have in the chat. If anyone has any burning questions, you can pipe them in now. In addition, you can certainly email us later if you have some questions that come up in the middle of the night when you're thinking about water chestnut. And with that, I think we'll just sign off.
Before we do that, I have a question, if you don't mind. So I think Kim is the person I want to address this question. So what is the distance, like the average distance that the people paddling have to, paddle between the removal point and the dropping point?
It varies in different sites. So it could be a mile. It could be less if there's a spoil site nearby. That's what Mike was referring to, that we have a challenge with our spoil sites because we are sometimes in the middle of a wetland that there is no land. And it's also potentially a long access paddle to the access. So we usually use a motorboat in some of those cases where a motorboat transports the spoils out of the site into a feasible location. But yeah, it varies in the sites. We have 81 sites. So each site has its own unique situation.
Okay, if I may, just my last question is, do you have any idea on average what is the weight of each load of the manual removal and the mechanical harvesting? Do you have any idea, like, of overall weight?
Yeah, we do have a weight, and I can send that to you. I don't have it like in my head.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Meg, go
Just
ahead.
wanted to add, Carlos, to that question that, I mean, it's also a limitation for the mechanical harvesting because as Kim mentioned, the offloading sites for the mechanical harvesters also are very challenging. It's a remote area, the southern end of the lake, and there are very few access points that can accommodate the transporter, the offloader, and then the trucks with the spoils. And so sometimes you have to spend a lot of time just transporting the spoils to and from the offloading site.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, great questions, good answers, everything. Really enjoyed this presentation, this series of presentations. So thank you everyone for attending the second session of the 2025 winter webinar. This will, I guess you mentioned, will be recorded or is being recorded and will be presented on our website and available for viewing at that point. So we just like to thank you all and have a great day, and we'll see you all at the next webinar.
Thanks, Erica.
Thank you.
Thank you.